Okay, Cop City in Atlanta. This is a story that a lot of people have been following for months now. New developments. We have domestic terrorism charges that are being filed against several protesters, or depending on your definition, rioters, whatever you want to call them, agitators, etc. But these are some really serious charges. I think some people were surprised to see felony domestic terrorism charges against numerous people down there at Cop City, which is a proposed police training facility in Atlanta. Patrick, what do you know about these charges, and does this fit the definition of domestic terrorism?
Under Georgia law, there is a domestic terrorism provision within Title 16 of the Georgia Code, and it basically says that if you commit any felony or attempt to commit a felony violation of any Georgia law with the intended purpose of causing serious bodily harm or killing a person or a group or disabling any civil or critical infrastructure or damaging or destroying a state or government facility or a public transportation system, and you're doing it for the purpose of intimidating civilians, the government, or any of its subdivisions, then that falls under the definition of domestic terrorism. So I would say that throwing Molotov cocktails at officers and throwing rocks at officers would definitely fall under that, and so would trying to destroy infrastructure and government buildings. I think in December of 2022, at one of their agitation gatherings, this group of people, I'm not going to use the term protester because I don't think this qualifies as a protest. They were trying to destroy one of the Atlanta police buildings. They were throwing rocks at the doors and damaging the property. Obviously, the intended purpose is to coerce the government to change its policy by the use of intimidation or coercion. So, yeah, I would say that it qualifies.
Yeah, I think the key term apparently is intimidation, right? If you're trying to use violence or destroy infrastructure to try to intimidate the government, then that can be defined as domestic terrorism. So, Pat, you just kind of outlined this a little bit, but what kind of behaviors are we seeing out there that takes this from being peaceful protest to something that could be charged as domestic terrorism?
Well, and as you see with some of the video that we've shown on this video, they are shooting fireworks, pretty powerful fireworks at police officers. You see them throwing objects. They were throwing Molotov cocktails at the police, and several pieces of equipment at this facility were damaged and caught on fire. So any of those, I think, would qualify.
I think that people need to understand these are ongoing protests out there, but yeah, they definitely have crossed the line. I think to anybody who's watching this has become fairly violent. We've had at least one death there. That's something that's still being investigated. But some Georgia State patrolmen fired on a protester who the patrolmen claim had a weapon or brandished a weapon or maybe even fired them. I'm not sure the details, but I know that's been a huge point of contention, and really it's starting to become a powder keg down around this property. This is a very large facility, and it's something that definitely seems to be coming to a head. What do we know about these charges and the kind of penalties that these people are facing? I think it was more than 40 people have been arrested, many of them on these domestic terrorism charges. What kind of time are they looking at if they ultimately have to plead guilty to that or are convicted at trial?
The Sunday night riot resulted in 23 arrests, and they were charged with domestic terrorism. And since May, there's been a total of 48 arrests, and only 5 were from the state of Georgia. And if they are convicted, there's 4 different conviction or sentencing schemes under the punishment statute for this crime. And no officers died. If an officer or some other individual died as a result of their behavior, then they would be sentenced to death, imprisonment for life without parole, or imprisonment for life. And then there's kidnapping, which I haven't heard reports of, serious bodily harm. If one of those rocks hit an officer and caused serious bodily harm, a protester charged with that would be facing not less than 15 nor more than 35. But the one that I think is going to fall for most of this is the critical infrastructure. So if they're convicted for destroying or disabling critical infrastructure or a state or government facility or public transportation system, then they're going to face imprisonment for not less than 5 nor more than 35. And then there is an option under the statute for the court and the prosecuting attorney and the defendant have agreed to a sentence that is less than that, then the court in its discretion can do a sentence for less and probate it.
So it seems like generally the majority of these people are going to be facing sentences potentially of a considerable amount of time. It sounds like the court does have some discretion to lower that sentence, and it's always possible that the district attorneys there can lower the charges to something less significant as domestic terrorism. I'm sure there's certainly numerous disorderly conduct and obstruction of justice type charges that would fall under the misdemeanor statutes or light felonies that they could always be pled down to. Interesting. We'll see what happens with these charges. There's quite a lot of people that have been arrested out there, and some of them are facing very significant, serious felony charges under the domestic terrorism statute. We'll have to watch this and see what happens. Thanks for watching. This is a story that we're going to continue to watch. Please subscribe. Please like the video. You know where to find us.